it is very similar to the flow chart, except the challenge and ability is more about the group identity and your personal identity. So if it's too much about the group, it becomes conformity. If it's too much about self, it becomes lonely. So in the book, he also said he thinks the best collaboration is when you are working with someone while maintaining your own identity, and you're working with a group. And I think this is very much like reflecting on what we learned from the Dragon prototype, which is sometimes you just want to be alone. You don't want to be caught with someone. Like, for example, let's say Left 4 Dead. There's no way you can just leave the other people because you're going to die. And I think it's very interesting to try to have a multiplayer dynamics where we can have the player to choose whether they want to be in a group or being by themselves. So in Flow, we talk about dynamic difficulty adjustment. Basically, we make a game that has a wide variety of potential experience with different challenges, and we let the player to make the choice by themselves. I think this subconsciously or intuitively, the player likes to pick challenge that is just in the right amount for themselves. So for Journey, we basically want to do the same thing, which is offer all these possibilities for players to engage or disengage from a group activity, and they would be able to find the right balance. And what I believe is that by giving them the freedom, they will find some really good collaboration that is truly genuine. A lot of co-op games I've been playing are, it's forced. You have to play with someone, and there's no other opportunities. And I think this will be something very different. So how does this thing work? Basically, for Journey, let's say we are in a desert. And let's say, simultaneously online, there's a lot of people playing. Let's say the black guys are players and the green ones are NPCs and some dead players. That's great. And our player comes in here. So what we want to do is that we don't want the world to feel overpopulated. I mean, hopefully we can have a lot more players than this, but we want to make sure that the player is only interacting with one person at a time, and we will basically create this kind of safety band, basically saying that anybody inside here, we don't want the player to see them. Well, outside, we don't want them to see them. We don't want anybody to see another player inside, because if you connect with them and they pop right in front of your face, that's going to interrupt the game. So we will pick the player who is far enough so you can connect with, and then the player might move towards any of them. Let's say one player moves down here and then you find a real player, and they really like each other, and they travel through the desert and they play a little bit. But then later on, something happens. They don't like each other anymore. There's also a choice for them just to naturally walk away. And if the other player is outside a certain region, we just disconnect. It's kind of like a blind date in a way. Except, if you're going to date a lot of people on your way. So we don't really know how many players you're going to actually encounter in the whole game. But what we believe is that eventually you're going to find one of them that is really, playing, at the same pace as you are, and you guys can really create some really nice collaboration and memories. So, from the Dragon prototype, we learned about this elastic online experience that we want to try, and we also have to bring it to PS3 because we, have games out there, so it has to be 3D, and there's quite a few surprises we had once we entered a 3D game.
So the way that we approach our projects is that once we've sort of, like I said, put all the ducks in the row, we understand really where we want to go with this. We focus the first significant portion of the project on developing our thesis, which means we have a thesis statement, a thing that we're trying to explore, and then through the pre-production and into the early production itself, we're really trying to decide, is this what we're going to do, and are we doing it well? And at the time that we started to work on Journey in earnest on the PS3, the thesis was together we can move the mountain. Obviously, we put the word together in there because we wanted to create this feeling of of importance of the relationship between you and another player, and that it was a journey you were going to take with someone else. And then there was this idea that there would be something that you did, an action. The mountain was very prominently featured in the thesis itself. And we really felt that this was great. But as we worked on it for a while, we just started vectoring away from it. Just over time, it wasn't really true. And at some point, I don't even remember what it was. One day someone said, it's not that anymore. What is it? We had a big meeting and everybody talked about it. And this is what we came up with. We all walk the path. Each journey is different. It's a little religious sounding. It sounds a little bit like, like the hook from a Christian webpage or something, but we liked it. We feel this is true. It's a true statement. But it implied some things that as we worked with it, we started to become comfortable with, particularly the idea that the world would be changing all the time and there'd be a ton of dynamic content. And, as a producer, I'm like, guys, there's 10 of us, I can't duplicate myself, and you should all sleep and not work every weekend. So this wasn't really what it was going to be either. We have a philosophy at TGC that we don't reveal the thesis of our game. We want the customer, the player, the fan, the new convert to find that for themselves, because we don't know who they are yet, and we want them to meet us on their own terms. So we're definitely no longer where we were. We're still converging on what we think the thesis really is, and I think we're really close to something, but we're not sure yet. And even if we were, we wouldn't be able to tell you. So you'll have to play the game to find out. What we do know is that moving from 2D to 3D was really difficult. We underestimated the degree to which we would have to rethink these mechanics to create a space that felt like a real earnest 3D effort and was immersive in the way that 3D games can be and what makes them so amazing. This is Journey in a nutshell. You start here and you go there. And when you look at it from the side, it's a pretty clear experience, and that's the way we draw a lot of our design documents. We slice it up, we talk about the phases and the way people are supposed to feel. But this is how it feels for a player. There's you, and there's the mountain. And immediately now you have something to go towards, which is fantastic. But then there's the camera, which constrains the space quite a bit. And we have spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about and processing and iterating over the camera, the way the character is framed, the different views that you have, especially since the camera is a little bit non-traditional in the space. This is the PS3 controller. The 6-axis is awesome, and we use the stick to move. You can call, you can make a shout with the O button. You can do stuff with the X button in certain contexts. It's like a context-sensitive action button. And this is actually, we talked about this just before we put the slides together. We don't know if we're going to ship with 2 buttons. Like, that's a big deal for TGC. We have a big focus on accessibility, and it's possible that the do button will go away. The do button and the call button have merged and then been separated several times over the course of the production. And the camera is on the 6-axis. So you actually tilt the 6-axis to look around while you're moving, and it's independent of the movement, which sounds complicated, and at times it can be. So we've been trying a lot to focus on simplifying those controls and making it feel second nature. So the other thing that Jenova kind of talked about a little bit is this idea that people are really powerful, that there's this communication ability. A lot of stuff that we've talked about in the press has been about how this game is about creating this sense of awe and wonder and a newness of encountering other people, which means we don't have access to the kinds of communication tools that you normally would. You get rid of all of those, and what you have is more like a model where you're in a world where visitors are coming and visiting with you, and we're trying to focus those communication methods on the actions that you take in the world, and that's been another huge portion of the development. How do we figure out a way for a person to express that they want to be together or that they want to be apart? We don't want to have an eject button on the controller that says, boot this person out of my world, because it's not, we're not 007. It's an emotional experience, and we want that to happen naturally, and that's been quite an effort. So 2D is not 3D. It's definitely something that we struggle with, but it's actually really interesting. We've learned a lot. In this scenario, the pacing is really obvious. You're approaching an object, you move together to collaborate, and pick up the cloth or whatever, the resource, and then you move away from each other. And if you want to follow that guy, if red wants to follow blue, you just keep moving, and they move at the same pace, and the camera moves, and you can see them. But in Journey, it's very different. Even this feeling of just seeing a person in 3D across this expanse, it just feels huge. And we created a sense of awe and wonder, but it also makes the game feel really slow. And it's very easy to lose track of people in the environment. Specifically, if this is me, and I'm hanging out with Blue, and then Blue takes off, I know where Blue is. Like, babies know the answer to this question, you know? And then as soon as Blue moves off, they know which direction that's going. But let's say that this is me. I'm the red person. And then I cross that threshold, and this is what I see. Like, I went over a ridge, and now there's this gorgeous vista and like some kind of a ruin on the other end. That guy, it's just really difficult for people to even remember that there's somebody there. And then, to get people to move through a 3D space, we actually add glitter and, you know, what Walt Disney would call weenies. We put these lights in the space and stuff to make people want to move places. We've added a resource that you can collect to kind of move your eye towards places we want you to go, which is a great idea, except, again, maybe I think about this guy, but so often I just really don't. When you have this resource in the space, this is the thing that we've struggled with probably the most recently. It's easy for players to become a little bit obsessed about the resource. There's twice as much of the resource in the thought bubble as there is in the world because the person is thinking about getting more and more and more of it. And if the resource enables them to be powerful, this is extremely true. So one of the very things that we built into the game to drive players forward makes them not want to think about other people because when they do, they get jealous. I don't want that cave to be on the other guy. I want it to be on me. And so we really try to create mechanics that will drive you and that people that are familiar with the space can immediately see, and people who've never played games can get very quickly without creating this kind of tension between people. And so we were talking about this just before we were coming over, and the way that Jenova said it, which I think is perfect, is collaboration is hard to make work, but it's especially hard in a non-co-op game. We're not building a cooperative game. We're building a game where we want true collaboration between people. And that has been the thing that we've been working on the most. And so for us, the journey is about creating a space where people genuinely work together, not because they're forced to, not because there's a monster or they have to save the princess, but because it feels better. And I mean, in a way, I guess it's kind of the world we want to live in.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's kind of like, sometimes it's kind of hard even for me to think about what we're trying to achieve. I think it's not a co-op game, but we genuinely wanted people to naturally collaborate, and that's what we believe what humankind is. So as a creator, I think it's kind of interesting that while I'm shaping this world, I'm trying to use my design to influence people's behavior, and I want them to do things what I believe that human should naturally do, and most of the time it's not the case. And it is a very interesting dynamics when I design a multiplayer game. I think it should be as exciting for anyone who is making a game that deals with more than one people, because that's when the humanity comes in and you have to face it and you have to struggle with it. And that's our talk.
So we have time for questions. We really wanted to leave a little bit of time for discussion because we got your feedback. So I'm just going to start in the front and go back. So right here.
So have you toyed around with the concept of trying to incorporate karma rather than resource and greed into it? It sounds like that's essentially what you're trying to create, is a karmic value.
Yes. Yeah, actually, there was a karma mechanic that we discussed very early on. It was a gifting system. Do you want to talk about that? It got a lot of support from marketing, so people were really excited about it, and then we totally killed it. So Jenova can tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I don't know, like a lot of words we've been using in the team is integrity. And early on, I wanted to see people treat each other nicely. So we were like, can we just reward them, by treating each other nicely? So we have this gifting system where if you play with someone and you really like them, you should just be able to give something to them. They can't gain it from themselves, they have to gain it from you. But as soon as we start toying with this idea,